Hello, I'm Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. Taking a slightly different approach this week, my guest is Chad Stebbins, who's the director of the Institute of International Studies. You've seen him a number of times over the years on the program talking about things happening on campus. Today we're taking a slightly different approach, looking back at a little bit of history in Newsmakers. I'm retiring at the end of the year, so I thought I'd invite Chad or have Chad join me for a chance to chat.
Well, actually, Judy, I'm not your guest today. I'm going to replace you as the host and interview you for a change. We're going to turn the tables and put you in the spotlight because you are ending a 34-year career plus at Missouri Southern, and we thought it was time to dedicate an episode of Newsmakers to you and your own reflections.
Thank you.
So the first episode of Newsmakers aired on May the 7th, 1986.
Right.
Shortly after you were hired by the Department of Communications at Missouri Southern. Now, I've got to know, was hosting the TV show part of that original job description?
Not that I was aware of. I came in, I was a creative services director and working with both radio and TV at the time, the radio station and the television station, and was helping behind the scenes, working with production and so forth. And my background itself came as a news producer, so I was not walking into the university with experience doing hosting and interviews and things like that.
And so you came to Missouri Southern with professional experience in the St. Louis and Tulsa markets?
Right. I lived in the St. Louis area, and then Tulsa. I was a news producer at KOTV, Channel 6 down there, and was working as a news producer. My husband's job brought us to Joplin and found out about the position here at the university. And was hired, like you said, by Dr. Robert Clark and Richard Masson, the Department of Communication. And I don't know at what point, at some point, Dr. Clark said, "Oh, by the way, we have this interview show we'd like you to host."
And so just for the record, you were not the first host of Newsmakers.
No.
There was a gentleman hired shortly before you named Tim Dry, who had been editor of the Chart newspaper at Missouri Southern, and he hosted a few episodes, but you're the one who really took it on and gave the program life.
I decided, as the program to focus on the Joplin community, and it's changed, evolved over the years. Like you said, the first show I did was kind of going back to my days of looking at being a reporter, where I did voiceovers and interviews and covered a city council meeting, and we had video of city council and sound bites and so forth, and it's evolved to interview type programs throughout the years as well.
And so over the past 34 years, you have had 3,337 different guests on the program.
Right.
And it's really a who's who of famous local and regional, even national personalities. Senator Richard Webster, who this building is named after, actor Dennis Weaver, Congressman Gene Taylor, Jim Lehrer, the famous newscaster, even Earl Hamner, creator of the Waltons, just a few of those 3,337. So I'd like you to just spend a few moments and maybe reflect on some of those famous and maybe infamous guests that you've had on the show over the years.
Wow. Well, there's been so many different people, and I think we're fortunate, at the university, a lot of great people visit the campus for purposes. When Dennis Weaver came as an alum to visit Missouri Southern, he shared his thoughts. He was able to come to visit, and at that time he was talking about Ecolonomics, his program that he was developing. So as people were coming to campus and I found out about it, I tried to bring them in for guests because, not only do they maybe make presentations on campus, we want to share them with the community and what they have to say. I've been fortunate to talk to many of the local political leaders throughout the years. You mentioned the congressmen, the senators, state representatives. I think I've visited with every Joplin mayor and city manager since the mid-'80s, to kind of keep up for the community what's happening in their community in those aspects. So there's been a wide range of different people, and they all have some great stories to tell.
Do you have a favorite person or two you've interviewed, or a more memorable interview?
Well, that's hard to say because everybody leaves a lot of memories. When I just recently started going through a list of shows that I've put together over the years, and as the names jumped out, and I said, "Oh, I remember that." Mentioned Richard Webster. The building's named after those people who were kind of giving you a sense of history, the founding of the university, and where we've come from and where it's gone. Gene Taylor, the congressman, the things that he did for our community and our region. I think it's really hard to pick just one most favorite show. There's just so many different people of what I've talked throughout the year. And everybody from our elected officials to, at one time I think I interviewed a retiring Catholic priest who had served for many, many years in the Joplin community. And I've talked to Little League baseball teams that won World Series, so it's a wide variety.
And so we did total it up this morning, and you have done 1,844 different shows over those 34 years. And Yeah, it's 52 weeks a year. You don't get to take a week off in most cases. You have to plug away. So what's the trick in filling 52 different programs every single year?
Planning and looking ahead. I think people have asked me, how do you come up with ideas for shows? And a lot of it's paying attention to what's happening in the community. What people are talking about, what's being on the news, what city council talks about, who's coming to campus, planning ahead. As we're recording even this show, we're recording in November, it's going to air in December. I'm trying to plan ahead a lot of times what's going to happen. And I always think, what would the viewers be interested in? We're here as a broadcast station to serve the community. We're serving the university as well. And what are people interested in learning about? I'm hoping people are learning by watching these shows.
I am assuming that the majority of guests you've contacted automatically say, yes, of course, but I suppose you've been turned down a few times?
There's been a few people who prefer not to speak. They don't, I don't want to come on camera. I've always tried to have an approach for the shows. I'm not going to grill you like 60 Minutes Face the Nation, and put someone on the spot or take an opinion that we unfortunately see in a lot of interview shows today. It's a chance for someone to share their story, and I'm hopefully the vehicle to allow them, through the questions, let them share their story or what they want to say.
So I had mentioned that you have to tape the show 52 times a year, but there was one exception, the summer of 1995 when your daughter Dana was born. So how did you manage that time?
Well, she was born in May, and we work with the students on a semester basis at the university. So knowing that I would be probably taking time off, I would be taking time off after she was born, I recorded a lot of shows in advance, and I called them evergreen shows, shows that didn't necessarily deal with a specific program or a date of an event. So they were shows that would be of interest all summer long that you could continue to run, and without having to rerun shows, whether it was like a lot of community agencies. I think about United Way community service agencies, people who serve the community, they're there year round. So I might bring those people in to share their stories. Or if we had 2 or 3 people coming in a 2-week span, instead of saying I only can interview one this week for Newsmakers, I'll do both and we'll hold that other interview for later.
So you have served the Department of Communications at Missouri Southern in numerous capacities, of course, with your role as general manager of KGCS TV. Would you maybe spend a minute telling us what that entails?
I always tell people it involves not only the day-to-day operations, keeping the station running, but working for the future, planning with the faculty, staff, and most importantly, KGCS is here for our students. So providing opportunities for our students to get that hands-on experience and learning. I don't count up the number of students we've had come through the station over the years, but there are so many that, like now we have students running camera, directing, that gain that experience by helping with programs like this.
You've also taught classes for the Department of Communications, right. Professional interviewing, news writing, others. How do you make that transition to being a classroom instructor?
I had the opportunity to start teaching after I started working at Missouri Southern. The department chair at the time, Mr. Massa, approached me and asked about being interested in teaching, and that's when I pursued my master's degree and was able to, I think I started off with oral communication, and at that time it was a Tuesday night class. One day a week, meeting Tuesday night for an oral comm in-person speaking class, and from there I've gone into others who said like interviewing classes, media management. But I think I try to take the same approach in the classroom as give the students experience. There's a lot they can learn, but a lot of it is by trying. When I taught the interviewing class, for instance, it wasn't just here's a book, here's how you do an interview. We're going to bring the students in here. They're going to learn how to interview by doing it. It's going to be hands-on type of approach.
So I'm sure you've been asked over the years, since Newsmakers is an interview program, what are some tips for a good interview? Could you share some of those with our audience today?
I think one of the key things is be prepared. A lot of people say, all I have to do is write 6 questions down and I can go do that interview. Well, that's just step one. You have to know, I try to learn as much as I can about the topic or the person who's coming in before that interview. Nowadays, of course, it's going online, doing research about them and their organizations. In the early days, it was, what can I find to read? What can I find out about them? So be prepared and listen. I think a successful interviewer has to listen. The person they're talking to is sharing a lot of information, and one of the faults people may have is there are 10 questions and they don't listen, and they say, okay, my next question is, the person just said something great they could have followed up on. So listen and be able to follow up on what they have to say. Yeah,
that's a great point, and that certainly holds true for print reporters as well.
Right.
The real nugget might be in what they're telling you, and then your ability to then craft a follow-up question to whatever topic they've just brought up. So, 34 years, the studios have changed a lot, the sets have changed a lot. Webster Hall didn't open until 1992,
Right.
but you started hosting Newsmakers 6 years before that. So, tell us about those early years of Newsmakers.
Early years is when the Department of Communication had the radio station and the television station over by the mansion, and what is now University Relations and Marketing. Their building was the television studio. And basically it was the garage prior to that tied to the mansion, but they renovated it into the television studio. And it was a great opportunity, hands-on equipment. At that time it was state-of-the-art in the 80s for the students to have that equipment. But I remember walking in when I, first day of work, I think it was, when I came to work, it didn't have office setups really. And Dr. Clark, my boss, said, well, you know, here's the studio, and we're taking a tour, and there's your desk. And it was kind of back in the corner of the studio next to some boxes stored in the corner. It was a lot different than what you have today with the nice studios. But I think despite those challenges, students produced a lot. We had a lot of programs, and the creativity from students is something that's carried throughout the years. It's whether you have a nice news desk like this, or we had backdrops that were what we called flats, folding backdrops that we sat in front of with some wooden chairs or some director's chairs. You could still do a show and be creative.
So what was it like in 1992 to move over to this brand new building and have a professional broadcasting studio to operate out of?
Well, that really was a whole new world, because we had, you know, new facility. We had, at that time, you know, they called Studio A, Studio B, 2 studios to work from. It opened up a lot of possibilities for what we could do. We had new control rooms. Some of the equipment moved over from the old facility, but we had new equipment for the students to work on. That was really an era where students were trying that hands-on, what can I do with this new facility, but also they were learning new things. We had the early days of video, we called video toasters, special effects in the 90s, things that people nowadays kind of laugh at and say, that's what you did in television. But you know, those types of behind-the-scenes production that really set the tone for where you're at today.
Well, Judy, you've mentioned Richard Massa, who established the Department of Communications and the television station as well as the radio station. Dr. Robert Clark, the first station manager. Who are some of the other professionals you have worked with over the past 34 years?
Wow, there's been so many in the department. Great faculty throughout the years. Of course, you've been here all along as well. I know when Dr. Carolyn Yoakum was, when I was starting to teach oral communication classes, she was a specialist for me in as far as speech communication. You know, so I worked a lot with her. But throughout the community, the professionals, we've had great support from the local stations. KOM has been a great supporter for probably since I think 1999, and running our show as well, early mornings. So people see the show on Saturday mornings on KOM, it's because they approached us and said, would you be willing to also run the show over here? So people like Danny Thomas, and you know, kind of spinning off of that, we've had the pioneer broadcasters tied into the Department of Communication over the years, and all those people that are honored there, I've gotten to know them over the years, professionally or when we've honored them. There's been just so many great people that way.
Well, it's very interesting that you mentioned your close affiliation with KOM and some of the other local channels, and we have to talk about the students. You know, they're the reason why we're here, and this show wouldn't be possible without them serving as your technical crew. Could you just maybe name a few students who have really excelled? I mean, they all have in their own right, but some have gone on to professional broadcasting careers.
Oh yeah, we've had a lot of students who are working out there now, and when you look at some of our honorees on the wall, former students, alumni like Eric Schrader, managing a television station. Now I can remember him as a student with the group of other students he worked with, and the creative, sometimes funny, quirky type projects they did that, you know, people would, you know, they enjoyed what they were doing and being creative. You know, Ezra Lamy, who's working in Los Angeles and New York with Warner Brothers, those types of people. There's a lot of students who are locals, or I say students, graduates, I use the term students, like graduates locally that are still contributing to the business and helping out. There's just so many people that's the fun part, is you see someone as a student and then they go on and you follow their career, and well, that's where they're at now and that's what they're doing. Jason Walsh just recently, you know, sent an email, and he's had a successful career as a news photographer going around the country doing some great things.
Would you say that the students have changed much over the years? In terms of their work ethic, their dedication or interest in a broadcasting career? Are they more well-rounded now? Any changes that you've noticed over 34 years?
I think probably the thing is the students now, the younger students, when they come in as a freshman, maybe they've been exposed to the media more than they were back in the 80s. Because of high schools having programs, their phones, they can shoot videos and do everything with their phones and their computers. In the 80s, I think everybody was hungry that, hey, this is TV, I can go in and I can do it. I haven't had a chance to do it before. Now students come in, they already have an inkling of what they want to do, but you can see that passion, that interest developed because they do have this opportunity to do it, take it that next step here.
And certainly Joplin High School and Webb City High School, among others, have fine broadcasting programs now that didn't exist in the 80s and 90s.
And it's transitioned because, we went from the days of maybe everybody wants to be a newscaster to, oh no, I want to do entertainment shows, or I want to do documentaries, or I want to do my own music video program. So, it's the types of things you can do now. You see, YouTube's everywhere. Everybody wants to do their own YouTube channel. What can you do in the future? Yeah,
I certainly remember the era of music videos, and everybody wanted to get involved with that.
We'd bring bands into the studio. People would record their bands, and, things. There's a lot of things that we've done over the years. Cooking shows have always been a staple. We had a series of shows with artists. If you come visit the station, the artwork on the wall are artists who did shows for us that we recorded, and some of them, Jerry Arnell, they aired on PBS stations. And so that was another aspect, an era where we had a lot of artists who wanted to do those how-to teaching type programs.
Have you had live animals in the studio too?
I think we've had some. I know we've had. I know we had a drug dog in here once doing a demonstration, and things like that.
So over the course of doing 1,844 different shows, I'm willing to bet you've had some bloopers or some unusual things happen that maybe you could elaborate on a little.
Yeah, they're things the audience doesn't see because we're recording these shows, so they're the unknown facts. I know early on we had, as I mentioned, the set where there was a folding flat that stood up behind us, and if you didn't set it up right, it wasn't really stable. And I had a show where I don't know what caused it, whether the fans came on the ceiling, it started falling in the middle of the show. So we had to reach back and grab it, stop the tape, we're going to do it over. I had a gentleman who was on one of our chairs, that they were director's chairs, which aren't really stable, and started kind of rocking, and I don't know why, just kind of rocked, and the front legs came back, and I could see him falling backwards and kind of catch him and say, no, and we had to stop the tape with that one. And so some of those things that you don't see because we obviously don't air the bloopers and what happens.
I'd like to take you back to KGCS just for a while. When you started, it was called Missouri Southern Television, MSTV. And then it became K57DR and then later KGCS. Could you maybe talk a little bit about the evolution of the station per se?
Well, MSTV was a cable channel. It was cable channel 18 on the Joplin cable system, and it started off, when it started, covering Joplin City Council meetings, and that was one of the key things, and that's what I did for numerous years, is go with, and we didn't have the robotic cameras like they do nowadays where they just go down and punch the buttons. We had to drag huge boxes of equipment and all the cameras down to City Hall twice a month to cover Joplin City Council. But that was one of the staples, and covering, of course, Missouri Southern Board of Governors and so forth. But then when we started broadcasting on K57DR, became a low-power station that kind of entered a new era for us, and that was something that really kind of set Missouri Southern apart at that time, that we're not only, a lot of stations, colleges may have had cable access channels, but we now have a broadcast channel. And so K57DR was the first broadcast channel. As that progressed throughout the years, the call letters changed. K57DR they were letters assigned by the FCC. So then we developed KGCS as call letters, and when we've gone through an evolution, we started broadcasting digitally when the digital transition happened, thanks to some generous support from Ruth Culpin, her foundation, supporting us and being able to do that. And then the last couple of years, we've changed from channel 22 to channel 21, and now we're high definition. So there's huge change between being a cable access, watch it only on Joplin cable TV, to now channel 21, and you can see us throughout the region. It
really has come full cycle since you've been here, and I think you're a huge part of that, obviously.
Well, it should be a point of pride for Missouri Southern that we're giving the students an opportunity to do something that maybe other schools don't have.
And I think I would venture to say that the community feels ownership of KGCS TV and even your Newsmakers program. It's become a staple. It's part of the fabric of Joplin and the four-state area now. And you must feel a measure of pride, in being able to do something so well for so long.
Well, I think it's the TV is one of those businesses where sometimes people say you don't hear from anyone unless they have a complaint. It's like a lot of broadcast things. But every once in a while, you'll see someone at the grocery store and I say, "I saw you on TV this morning," or and you think, or "I saw you on TV last night," and say, "Well, people are watching." That's kind of reassuring. Or I learned something about a topic that I didn't know about. As I've been looking at the community and the people that have been involved in the shows and the things that they're doing with their organizations, the interviews with the nonprofits that are out there helping people, I'm hoping that maybe by being on my show, they're able to spread the news and help meet more needs in our community that way. And so there's a way that it all kind of ties together. Licensed station, yes, to the university, but also serving the community. And that's something, even though I started off as community service director, I've kept that thought throughout. We're here to serve the Joplin community.
When you started this job on in
April, yeah.
April of 1986, did you have any idea that you would end up retiring from Missouri Southern? You probably had some thoughts of going back into the professional broadcasting area.
Yeah, because I came from the field of professional broadcasting, was a television news producer. And that side of the business, really you had to move up in many cases. And when we moved to Joplin, this job came along and I thought, well, I'll see how it works. And then I think what really hooked me was that being able to teach and work with the students that way. It was more than, okay, we're going to run a TV station, but to being able to work with the students more. And I think whether it was teaching formally in a classroom or just being in the control room, working behind the scenes or helping them create ideas for shows or how can they solve this challenge on making this work. The early days we had it on videotape, and people today may not appreciate the fact that videotape is not like a digital editing. You make a mistake and you just go on. Videotape is like, I made a mistake, what do I do? You have to reassure them, okay, now here's how we can fix it.
You've certainly had a lot of community groups part of the TV station and Newsmakers, and I'm trying to think of the name of the group of senior citizens.
Visions Unlimited.
Visions Unlimited, who would come in and do their own TV show for several years.
And that was a lot of fun. We had, it was through the Division of Continuing Education at Missouri Southern. They offered a kind of a basic course in TV production for senior citizens, and they came in and developed their own TV show. The staff and the students supported them, but they learned how to do the interviews. They ran the cameras. They took the cameras out in the field and they came back and edited, and they did it for many years and really had a lot of creativity. And it wasn't always just senior citizen topics and issues. They went out and showcased the community.
You've already touched on some of the benefactors the station has had. Ruth Colpin, for example. It's not inexpensive to run a TV station and do the necessary upgrades, especially to the high definition area. Who are some of the benefactors that we should maybe recognize today?
Well, of course, I mentioned KOAM. They've supported us with this set we're sitting on. It's donated by them years ago, and we had a fund contributed to the memory of one of their engineers for our master control room. So contributors such as that. The Missouri Broadcasters Association has indirectly helped us in so many different ways. They support us directly financially with like our Media Showcase Day and our Hall of Fame, but they have provided support for us to be able to provide access to our students for scholarships or recognition for contests. There's a lot of supporters along those lines. We have what we call a contribution account where people have donated money, maybe not huge sums like Ruth Colpin gave, but there's some money to help us that then helps purchase more equipment for the station and provide us opportunities that way.
And of course, the students are the direct beneficiaries.
Right.
They of course want to work on state-of-the-art equipment that they're going to see in the professional world when they graduate, but it is expensive.
It's expensive and it's
equipment.
A challenge. Things change so fast. We today you can buy a computer, it's outdated next year. Same thing with broadcast equipment. It's changed so much. What can you do to keep pace? So, like you say, they're ready to handle the equipment when they go out in the field.
So Missouri Southern is currently conducting a search for your replacement.
Right.
What advice would you give that person when they start, maybe in January?
Embrace the opportunities. I think there's a lot of different facets in the job. It's like I said, there's management involved, there's scheduling, there's sometimes people say, well, there's a lot of those routine things, but I think kind of embrace the opportunities and what you can do to serve Missouri Southern, serve the community, work with the students and serve the students. That there's a lot of things that can happen. The future is changing, the station may evolve and change as well, but keep in mind that it's got a lot of heritage behind it as well.
And if we could go back in time to 1986 when you started, is there one or two things that you wish you could tell a younger Judy Stiles?
Oh, wow. be prepared for a lot of things happening over the years as far as changes. Equipment, the university has changed tremendously. Like I said, we were in a building across campus that's now repurposed for another facility. Just always being able to adjust, adapt. Tell people that you can't predict what's going to happen in the future, but adjust as things happen. Prepare as you can.
So you're on the cusp of retirement, which will occur sometime in December.
Right.
And are you going to be one of those people who closely watches the station and occasionally picks up the phone and says, "What are you doing out there?"
Yeah, I think the next generation, the people who take over can, I have confidence there's going to be a good group. I will watch. I'm not going to leave and say I'm never going to look at the station again. I think it's part of the community. I'm going to remain part of the community. I think, if people have questions, I'll be glad to answer the phone and ask questions, but I'm not going to be somebody and saying, you're doing it wrong. It's their turn, whoever comes in to do that.
And, we haven't even mentioned that the St. Louis Cardinals, you're bringing Cardinal baseball to
That's
Joplin
right.
area viewers.
Yeah, we've been doing the Cardinals Caravan for quite a few years, and that's been a point of pride, I think, being able to bring them in town. The station has been kind of a host for that, and I've helped coordinate those. Prior to that, we had Cardinals telecasts until they stopped doing over-the-air telecasts. So even though I was from St. Louis, I love the Cardinals. I think it's great to bring that type of programming to the Joplin community as well. And watching those caravans and seeing all those fans enjoying their chance to meet the players and hear from the players, and knowing that KGCS played a role in helping host that event, it's always been fun.
Well, Judy, we'd certainly like to congratulate you and thank you for 34 years of excellent service and bringing professionalism to the Joplin area market. And we wish you the very best in retirement and hope you're not a stranger. Hope to see you back on campus. And again, it's been a wonderful, marvelous career, and you have our sincere gratitude.
Well, thank you very much, Chad. I appreciate it, and appreciate everybody who's working on the program and has continued to do so. And we look forward to seeing where it goes in the future. And I'd like to thank the viewers for joining us this week. I'm going to say I'll see you next time because there is going to be one more show. I'm going to try to do a wrap up with some highlights. And then Newsmakers Classics will come on after I retire. We're going to try to have some of those classics until a new system is developed for continuing the program. So thank you for joining us. We'll see you again.